again, I'm really excited about today. Today's going to be a little different from what we normally do. And so we have been in a series, studying First Peter for about 9 weeks. So for 9 weeks, we've been talking about what we just sung. Christ is our firm foundation. Our faith is built on who Jesus is, right? And so if you are new here today and you don't know who Jesus is, I want you to know, just like that song says, winds will come, waves will come. If your faith, if your life is not built on this firm foundation, who Jesus is, right, then it won't last. Then you will live a life without hope. But Jesus Christ is the hope where we can anchor our faith. God sent his son. The holy God sent his son to pursue after sinful people, right? Sinful people who have strayed away from him, rebelled against him, but because of his relentless love, he pursued after us, and he paid for our sins by his blood. And this is what Peter talks about in this book, that he suffered in the flesh. And so by his blood we are redeemed. And by his blood and by his death on the cross, he bought us back. He freed us, delivered us from a spiritual stronghold. But then not just that, but all the strongholds that we are dealing with. And not just died, but he resurrected. He resurrected to give us a brand new life, a victorious life in which we are walking in, right? And so this is a life that you don't have to feel hopeless. This is a life where you can be victorious. But one of the things that we talked about in the book of Peter is that even though we have this victorious life in Jesus, we will still suffer. We will struggle with some things. And this is why, one, God gives us the gospel to remind us to anchor our faith in. But then not just that, he gives us community, right? Because in community, we can have strength to struggle well, right? Or to suffer well. And so we talked about this throughout the 9 weeks of the series, but instead of transitioning from one series to another, what we want to do is allow this message or these messages that we preach for the past 9 weeks to breathe a little bit. And what I mean by that is there were some difficult conversations that we had. And so rather than just moving on, we want to take some time to process through some of those things. And I know a lot of us have been processing it through our city groups, and so there have been a lot of questions that probably came from some of these sermon topics, or probably just questions that you may have had where you are listening and you're wrestling with how I'm hearing the Bible and Peter talks about suffering, but then how I feel right now in my suffering, and I don't know how to process that. And so what we're going to do today is really give us a time to process that together. And so rather than having a sermon where we are telling you what you need to hear, we want to make this space a safe space where, one, we're going to invite a couple to kind of share with you how they have been processing through some challenging things in their lives. And so after we hear from them, we're going to have a panel discussion with a few people in our church, but then also some professionals who deal with some of the issues that we're going to talk about, and that will open up a time for you to ask questions. And so we want to invite you to be thinking through some questions where you can ask them. But then not just that, but we want to conclude with a time of prayer, right? Because the church is a place where not only do we want to hear the gospel, but we want to edify one another, but then we want to pray for one another. And because that's how Peter closed it off. Peter closed it off where we need to create an environment in community where we feel safe. We can bring our cares. We can cast our cares on God, but we can cast our cares on one another to pray for one another so that we can suffer well. Does that make sense? So we will conclude with a time of like a mini worship night but morning, afternoon, but like a mini worship prayer, time of worship and prayer, where we're gonna pray for one another and encourage each other in light of all the things that we discussed in First Peter. So right now, I want to invite Chris and his wife Shani to come forward. Chris is one of our elders. Make sure I don't die. You got the low chair. Thank you. Okay. And this is Shani, his beautiful wife. Thank you. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Appreciate that. What up, family? Good, man. You need to let it down.
Maybe a little bit.
I was about to say you look very tall.
I'll let you guys introduce yourself, but then give you the rest of the time.
All right. These chairs have never been more comfortable, so thank God for that. My name is Chris Duncan, or Chris Tan Duncan, but nobody calls me that because everybody thinks I'm mispronouncing my own name. So Chris Duncan. I hail from St. Louis, Missouri, Alabama A&M University, and I'm an elder here at Blueprint Church.
I'm going to keep talking. There we go. Good morning. My name is Shani Drake Duncan. I am born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. Went to the illustrious Spelman College. Yes, let's go.
All right.
Also alum of Georgia State's J. Mac Robinson College of Business, and just very happy to be here today.
I mean, you put a lot on Spelman College. You know what I mean? Yeah, so during this time, we definitely want to talk through some things that we have experienced as a couple, as a family, individually. And so during this time, back in January of this year, January 2024, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Does anybody know what MS is? All right, so MS, and I was telling Davis earlier, MS is one of those things that like you tell people and they're like, oh man, I'm gonna be praying for you, but they don't really know what it is. And I appreciate the prayers, regardless if you know what it is or not. So MS essentially is an autoimmune disease, and my immune system attacks my nerves. And so it shows up in different people, different ways. If you get 10 MS patients together, and trust me, I go to Shepherd Center, which is an MS clinic. If you get 10 of us together, our symptoms show different ways. And so essentially there's a coding, if you will, think about it like a power cord that you charge up a phone. There's an outside cord, or the white coating that's on the outside of that cord, and my immune system attacks that coating on my nerves. It's called melanin, or not melanin, myelin. Jeez. Hopefully it ain't attacking my melanin. So yes, I could definitely take that joke a lot further, but I won't. So it attacks my myelin, and that's the outside coating of my nerves. So how it shows up for me is I have issues with walking, I have issues with heat. Now that's pretty common amongst all MS patients, is that we have issues with heat because it exacerbates the symptoms. I'm prayerfully not affected vision-wise, but some people have vision problems. Some people have dizzy spells. Some people are in constant pain. By the grace of God, I'm not in any pain on the ongoing. Like, I feel stiff sometimes. Like right now I feel stiff, but will walk slow and try to take my time instead of just doing it all at the same time to my wife's chagrin. So yeah, this entire series has been so heavy in a good way. Not, I know that that's a negative connotation, but heavy in a good way of like the Lord is still faithful through every single trial that we face. And so that happened in January. I got diagnosed in January, and then March, right around the corner, my brother passed. And so, like, we as a family have been going through already trying to adjust to the new normal. And then my brother passed, and I'm one of seven. And my brother was the only one besides me, of course, that was here in Atlanta. So we were very close. And so that definitely was, outside of the physical issues, like that was the emotional issue that I'm still dealing with. Like you lose someone, there is no end on that. And you just, day to day, just deal with that and process and cry when you need to cry and smile when you need to smile and do all of those things. So I'm gonna pass it over to Shani.
Yeah, so throughout, I would say Chris being diagnosed was like a harbinger of things to come for the year. This has been an incredibly just trying and difficult year for our family. I think the way that his diagnosis has impacted us collectively, I have become somewhat of a caregiver, not in a sense that Chris needs constant care, but the entirety of our lives has shifted quite a bit from when we first began dating to being married to now. And I think for someone like me who craves stability, the diagnosis has been incredibly destabilizing because we are learning to adjust to a new normal, but it's not, okay, he has MS and there's some mobility issues, so now we know how to address it. We find new things every other week on how Chris may be impacted by something and how that ends up having a ripple effect throughout the family. So that's been very difficult for me personally throughout this time. It's been difficult for us. The passing of my brother-in-law was just so shocking. It came out of nowhere. And I think the thing that really was the most difficult to deal with that was that literally the day before he passed, we were having a conversation about how we needed to invite him over to the house and make sure we were loving on him and engaging with him in a more meaningful and intentional way. And that literally the next day he was gone. And so for us to first have Chris's diagnosis happen, have our brother pass away, was extremely difficult. And then on top of that, I am someone who lives with depression, anxiety. I have seasonal depression. And this year, I have experienced the most intense depressive episode of my life. It was difficult existing day to day. Just getting through every day was a win. Waking up in the morning, being able to get out of the bed and just be grateful that I could do that was an absolute win. And I'm still not out of it. I'm feeling much better than I did for the past 3, 4, 5 months now, but the depression that I experienced this summer really pulled me away from my community. I felt very isolated, and it was self-isolation. These are symptoms of depression that people deal with. These are symptoms that I've dealt with. I felt completely isolated. I withdrew from everyone I loved, from everything I loved. I had no interest in the things that brought me joy. And it has just been literally the hardest year of my life, and dealing with that on top of Chris's diagnosis, on top of losing our brother, and really just trying to make it day to day has been incredibly hard. But I think that this series encouraged me in a couple of ways. Number one, there weren't any false promises that just because we believe in God and that we have God as the foundation of our faith, that doesn't mean we're not going to experience trials. And I really appreciated the fact that through each of these sermons, there was no, and when you get to the other side, it's gonna be, rainbows and fields of flowers and all that, because we don't know what it's gonna look like. I'm still depressed. Chris still has MS and will. We are still navigating our day-to-day, but just the fact that there were no false promises was extremely encouraging to me, because I don't know what this is gonna look like in the next 2 months, in the next 2 years, but just incredibly grateful to be able to lean into my faith and know that no matter what I'm going through, I still have God to lean on. And that has just been incredibly encouraging for me as an individual and for me, and for our family. And I also think that, there's a lot of stigma associated with mental health, challenges, conditions, diseases that people live with. And it is very difficult for me to share this in front of people because I don't want to be defined by those struggles. But I also know that there is incredible power in sharing these stories, because there are so many other people in this room who are dealing with this. And it's difficult to talk about because you don't want to be seen in a particular way. You don't want to be cast aside as someone who has issues. You don't want to be looked at as a person whose faith is deficient, because why are you going through that? Do you pray enough? Or is God centered in your life enough? And I promise you, if it was just prayer, depression would never know me. But it's not, it's beyond that. And I just want to make sure that people understand that there is help, resources for you, especially for folks who are dealing with mental health challenges, conditions, and issues. But I will just say, in all of this, in this journey of just putting one foot in front of the other this summer, it was incredibly important for me to actually start telling my community what I've been going through and being very transparent about the fact that I have been struggling. I am struggling. I'm sorry I'm pulling away. I wish I wasn't. And just being edified through community has also been incredibly important for me as we've navigated all of the trials and the strife that we've been dealing with this year.
Yeah, so for me personally, this series has been a doozy. If we recall, we came out of James, which is a series that I'm like, all right, James already throwing some haymakers and some uppercuts, and then we go into the DNA series. I was like, all right, amen. Shout out to the church, tithe more and be a generous steward, responsible sibling, be gospel-centered, in addition as disciple maker. I was loving it. And then we get into 1 Peter, which I have often, to be honest, avoided because it's such a heavy text. I mean, whichever way you come from is encouraging, but it's on the other side of like going through trials while you're going through trials. And it's an old gospel singer. I grew up in the church. My grandma is missionary Baptist, so I'm old black church. And it's an old gospel singer by the name of Inez Andrews. And I never heard her song hit me as deeply as it did. And she has a very popular song at that time called, it's essentially the hook goes, Lord, if you don't move the mountain, give me the strength to climb. And I think so many times, like I was taught, like, you just need to pray more. You just need to believe more. Faith of a mustard seed will move the mountain, which is real. And also, the will of the Lord is real as well. Like, hey, this may be what the Lord wants me to go through. And I remember after I got diagnosed, praying one day, and I literally stated, Lord, use my body as a testimony. And while, in the middle of my prayer, I was like, hold on now. I don't know if I know what I actually signed up for. And yeah, I do think during a series like 1 Peter, like Shani said, that, it's not just a pray more. It's not just a believe harder. It is literally like Christ is my firm foundation, like we just saying. Like literally, all I have is Christ. All I have to cling to is Christ. And so I think a lot of times there is a stigma around just the shame of going through things. But there's so much healing when you tell your community, hey, bro, today sucks. This week sucks, this month sucks, this year sucks. But in all of that, I'm still trusting God. And one thing that Chip Dye says that Dahadi said, I mean, I don't know how many attributes you got to give to Chip Dye. As Dahadi always says, that that life is tragic and God is faithful. It's not a but, it's an and. Meaning that, like sometimes you just go through it. And we give it to God, and we know that heaven is going to be perfect, and this world is very broken. Come on. And we got to go through things. And one of the most common questions I get in religious spaces are, how did the diagnosis change your relationship with Christ? And it actually forced me to lean more to Christ because, I mean, I can't walk like I used to. I can't run like I used to, but I could pray even harder than I used to. I can rely and grasp on the God even more than I used to. And seeing a series like 1 Peter, it really just reinforces our need to depend on Christ. And I am so thankful to be part of a church, a part of a body that believes in is not just praying harder. It is literally the word of God. It's not an if, but it's a when we struggle. How do we struggle as believers? And also, I want to mention that 1 Peter is always a text that is interesting because, like, I often joke around and say that once you get to 1 Peter 5, some of y'all check out. I feel like that's a huge indication and a warning from Peter about the elders of the church. And I often say, like, I believe, I'm not going to get into theology conversations. I often believe on the other side of this life that God is going to welcome everybody into his kingdom that believes in him. And then he's going to be like, yo, my elders, my pastors, I need to talk to y'all over here. And like, it's always sobering to read like how heavy it is. And I know that's one thing that we talk about in the elders room all the time. Are we okay with sitting before God and giving an account and with everything that we're going through? Like, God did not say, Chris, like, I need you to accomplish everything that I have mandated for your life until you get MS. No, the mandate is still there through the MS. I may be moving slower, but I'm still moving. And that's only because of God. And yeah, the mission always outweighs the stressors that's going to come. They're going to happen. The struggle is going to happen.
Yeah, I'll also just add that for my experience dealing with my depression and anxiety this year, in the midst of all of the things we were going through as a family, even professionally, my job got incredibly busy. I got in a car accident about a month ago, lost my car. It's just been an incredibly difficult year, but one of the things that we've always tried to do collectively is just remember that, like, our God is our foundation. We are, no matter what we are going through, no matter what the circumstances are, I know I always have God to lean on. I know God is always going to be there to undergird me, to protect me. And even if the circumstances don't end up the way that I would like them to, I know that there's a greater purpose in God's will in all of this and how we live our lives. And I just want to say, for people who are struggling with their mental health, there are several resources. My actual professional job, I work for a nonprofit that focuses on protecting youth mental health. And there are several free resources call, text, chat 988 if you're in crisis. Like, these things are really important, because one of the things that is important to me is eliminating stigma around these issues, not just culturally, but in church spaces as well. Because a lot of times there is an indictment on, let me rephrase this. There can be an indictment on your mental health and connection to the strength of your faith. If you just prayed more, if you centered God more, what are you doing to emulate God's love in your life? And that's the reason why you're going through this. But when we see Chris with his MS, nobody's asking him if his life in God is deficient. Nobody's telling him, oh, well, if you just prayed more, you might be able to walk the way you walked previously. And I think we really need to work collectively to have these difficult conversations with one another and make space for people who are going through this. Because as someone who goes through it, it's incredibly isolating, and I feel isolated from people, and it's self-imposed through no desire of my own, but just because of the way that depression and anxiety impact my own life. And I just want to make space for folks who are going through that to know you're not alone in this. You're not by yourself. There are plenty of us who are dealing with this. And I know a lot of us don't like to talk about it because it is stigmatizing, and you don't want to be othered. But just know that you're not deficient. God's love is enough to conquer all. And even as I know I have depression, I've experienced it before, I'm going to experience it again, that doesn't make me question God. It just makes me lean into God more and just seek him out more as I continue to work through these things and as we continue to work through what we've been through as a family.
Amen. Let me pray as we transition. Definitely praying for our family, but also knowing that you all may have struggles in your own life. And it may look like physical, mental, emotional, whatever it may be, but let me pray. Father God, thank you. You are the king over every single detail of our life. If you know the hairs on our head, Lord, we know that you know every single thing that we're going through. Help us to cast our cares on you. Help us to depend fully on you, Lord. We love you. We thank you for this time together as a family. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I feel so encouraged by your strength, both of your strength, to be able to share where you are. I think one of the things that you reminded us, and I heard it multiple times in different ways, is that as Christians, when we think about like what is victory for us, the ultimate victory we have, that can never be taken away from us. But what I hear is the daily victories, right? And daily victory doesn't mean that like your life doesn't have problems, like you're free from problems. But in fact, what 1 Peter says, after you have suffered a little while, right? Not you no longer suffer, but after you have suffered a while, like he will restore you. And this is daily. Like he will comfort you. He would give you strength. And this is daily. And what I hear is that, man, God, you are not removing these issues from my life, but you are keeping me in it. But then I have strength to continue. And I hear a lot of victory in your voices, right? And I hear a lot of victory from your stories. And so I really am grateful that you had the strength today just to kind of share and hopefully open the floodgates for all of us to feel that as a believer, I can share where I am and not have to worry about feeling judged. And so I hope later, after we get we're finished with our panelists, like this will be an opportunity I want you to have where you can share your testimony, how the Lord has been working in your life, or where you are and how we can pray for you. Again, thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, so I want to invite